Like when you're out hiking on a really rugged trail, you occasionally come across this physical gap in the path.
Right, like a stream or maybe a fissure in the rocks.
Yeah, exactly. Something wide enough that a simple step it won't do it. You actually have to leap.
Mm.
And there's this very specific, undeniable physics to that moment.
Oh, absolutely. The biomechanics of it are fascinating.
Right. Because if you just commit to the jump, if you launch yourself without a second thought, your momentum just carries you right over to the other side safely.
Yeah, you clear it easily.
But if you take that tiny, unconscious stutter step right at the very edge of the gap.
Oh, you lose your momentum entirely. I
Mhm.
mean, biomechanically, your brain is sending these completely conflicting signals to your muscles.
Like it's fighting itself.
Exactly. Your center of gravity shifts backward in self-preservation, right? Just as your feet are trying to propel you forward, and you slip. You end up falling right into the mud, or, much worse.
It's basically the physical manifestation of doubt. Like the hesitation literally creates the failure. By trying to protect yourself at the last possible microsecond, you manufacture the exact disaster you were so worried about.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you hesitate at the edge of that gap, your brain is, well, it's essentially programming your body to fail.
Right. And today, we're taking that physical reality and we're applying it to human psychology. We're looking at a fascinating stack of historical sources to uncover why timidity creates obstacles and how audacity eliminates them.
It's a really incredible deep dive. We've got a lot of compelling historical data here.
We really do. And for those of you listening who are trying to navigate, say, a complex corporate hierarchy or pitch a massive project or just, figure out how to stop being sidelined in your daily life, understanding this mechanism is the ultimate shortcut.
It really is. We are diving deep into the raw, often uncomfortable power dynamics of boldness.
Yeah, we're looking at historical figures who inherently understood how to manipulate the human nervous system. We're talking con artists, master seducers, ruthless monarchs.
And we're examining them completely impartially, just dissecting their strategies to understand the universal, deeply hardwired human reactions to scale, to confidence, and of course to hesitation.
Right, because these extreme examples act like a magnifying glass on our everyday interactions. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because the core thesis we are looking at today makes a claim that sounds almost reckless at first glance.
It does sound a bit wild at first.
Yeah, the argument from our source material is that any mistakes you commit through audacity are easily corrected with more audacity.
Which is a bold claim in itself.
Exactly. It presents this stark binary. If you are unsure of a course of action, you simply should not attempt it, period. Because your doubts will infect your execution.
And it's not just an internal feeling. Timidity isn't some private emotion you keep hidden inside. It's a highly visible, contagious energy. It's essentially the scent of blood in the water.
The scent of blood, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, think about the evolutionary biology of a hunt. Lions literally circle the hesitant prey. Retreating from a predator actually triggers their instinct to chase you.
Right. Running away makes you the prey.
Exactly. And in human social dynamics, we have a highly attuned subconscious radar for the weaknesses of others.
So true.
If in a first encounter with someone, say a negotiation, a new job, a social dynamic, if you immediately demonstrate a willingness to compromise, to back down, to retreat,
Yeah.
you inadvertently signal low cost and high reward to the other person.
You're basically painting a target on your own back.
You bring out the predator in people who aren't even necessarily bloodthirsty to begin with.
Wow. Okay, that is a terrifying but crucial dynamic. Your weakness literally creates predators out of normal people. A willingness to compromise early on invites people to push you around.
It really does.
So let's dig into the mechanics of this. Why are we so prone to timidity in the first place? I mean, most of us want to avoid tension, right? We want to be liked. We tell ourselves that we are just being polite or that we're showing empathy and concern for the feelings of others.
Right, we love to frame our hesitation as a virtue. We tell ourselves it's a moral high ground.
Totally.
But if you analyze the cognitive state of timidity, it completely flips that narrative.
Yeah.
Our sources argue that timidity is actually rooted in deep self-absorption.
Self-absorption, how so?
Well, think about your internal monologue when you're feeling timid or hesitant in a social setting. What are you saying to yourself? What will they think of me? Will they be mad at me? Will I look foolish? Am I overstepping my bounds?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're entirely consumed by your own ego.
Exactly. Your own safety, your own self-image, it's all about you. Boldness, conversely, is outer-directed.
Outer-directed.
Yes, when you act boldly, your cognitive load is focused outward on the goal. on the other person, on the action itself. Because bold people are less self-conscious and less repressed. They relieve the people around them of the burden of managing that awkward tension.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Hmm.
We've all felt that awkward energy of hesitation. When you hem and haw, you create this gap in the conversation or the interaction.
The literal void, yeah.
And in that empty space, you give the other person time to doubt you and to doubt themselves. You infect them with your own anxiety.
You really do.
Think of a conversation where someone is asking you for a favor, but they're so apologetic and hesitant and like overly cautious about it that it makes you feel embarrassed for them.
It elicits secondhand embarrassment.
Mm-hmm.
Human nature abhors a vacuum, right? And it tends to fill empty social space with anxiety.
Right.
The source material uses this great imagery. The hare fleeing the hunter scurries directly into the snares because its panic blinds it. But a predator attacking? The lion creates no gaps. Its movements are just too swift.
No.
Exactly. The sheer velocity of a bold move leaves others absolutely no space or time to process doubt or worry. They're forced to react to your reality.
You know, there's an old Aesop's fable about the boy and the nettle that perfectly captures this. Have you heard this one?
I think so, but remind me.
So a boy lightly touches a nettleweed, gets stung terribly, and runs crying to his mother. And she tells him, "It was just your touching it lightly that caused it to sting. Next time, grasp it tightly and it will do you no hurt."
And that happens to be biologically accurate, by the way.
Wait, really? The plant actually works like that?
Oh, absolutely. Nettles are covered in these tiny, fragile, hollow hairs that are filled with irritants like histamine and formic acid. If you brush against them lightly, you barely disturb the leaf, but those hairs act like microscopic hypodermic needles that pierce your skin and inject the venom.
Yikes.
But if you crush the leaf with a firm, aggressive grip, you actually shatter those hairs flat against the surface of the leaf before they have a chance to penetrate your skin.
Wow, that is an incredible biological metaphor for social friction. If you engage with a difficult situation tentatively, you get stung. The friction tears you apart.
Right, but if you crush it with total commitment, you neutralize the danger.
Yeah, exactly. Let me throw a modern analogy at this, something you experience every single time you drive. Think about merging onto a highly congested, fast-moving highway.
Oh man, one of the most common high-stress triggers in modern daily life.
Highly stressful. If you are driving down that on-ramp and you are timid, you tentatively tap your brakes, you're constantly looking over your shoulder, hoping someone will magically part the seas and just wave you in, what is the actual systemic result?
That's chaos. Pure chaos.
You confuse the other drivers, you force everyone around you to guess your intentions,
Yeah.
you create a phantom traffic wave that cascades miles down the highway, and you dramatically increase the chances of causing a horrific accident.
Yeah, it's incredibly dangerous.
But if you accelerate boldly into the gap, matching the speed of traffic and signaling your intent undeniably, the system flows naturally. Your audacity makes the entire ecosystem safer because you remove the ambiguity.
That's a perfect way to frame it. The timid driver is completely self-absorbed in their fear, and that inward focus creates chaos for the entire highway.
Exactly.
But the bold driver is outer-directed.
Yeah.
They're reading the flow, identifying the physics of the gap, and committing to it. That puts the other drivers at ease because there's nothing left to interpret.
Wait, let's pause here, though. I'm struggling with the boundary line on this. You're saying the bold driver smoothly merges at 70 miles per hour, making it safer. But what separates that outer-directed boldness from a driver who just, I don't know, closes their eyes, hits the gas, and swerves blindly into traffic out of pure arrogance? How are we defining boldness here?
That is a critical distinction. Boldness is never defined as impulsivity or a lack of thought. That's just recklessness.
Okay, so what is it then?
Boldness is about the absolute commitment to the execution of the action once the decision has been made. The planning phase should be meticulous.
Right.
The driver checking their mirrors, calculating the speed of the approaching semi-truck, identifying the exact space they need. That is all logic and calculation. But the moment the steering wheel turns, the execution must be absolute.
Ah, I see.
Timidity is dangerous precisely because it is an action taken with a divided mind. Arrogance is acting without thinking. Boldness is acting without doubting the thought you've already had.
Acting without doubting the thought you've already had. That's brilliant. Okay, so a little boldness smooths out a social interaction or a highway merge. It removes the micro-frictions.
Right.
But what happens when we scale this up? If a little boldness is a tool to navigate reality, what does a massive amount of boldness do to reality itself? Here's where it gets really interesting. We have to look at one of the most audacious confidence tricks in human history to see how boldness short-circuits human rationality.
But you're talking about the 1925 scam of Victor Lustig. This is essentially a masterclass in exploiting the cognitive heuristics of the human brain.
It's unbelievable. So picture this. Paris, 1925. Count Victor Lustig, who is, of course, a career con artist, not an actual count, reads a newspaper article detailing the astronomical maintenance costs of the Eiffel Tower.
Right, because the tower was originally built for the 1889 World's Fair. It was meant to be temporary.
Exactly, temporary. By 1925, it's rusting, the paint jobs are ruinously expensive, and a significant portion of the Parisian public actively hates it and wants it torn down.
Which is so funny to think about now.
I know, right? But Lustig takes this legitimate public debate and uses it as the foundational anchor for an unimaginably bold illusion. He sends official-looking invitations to 5 of the wealthiest scrap metal dealers in France, summoning them to a highly confidential meeting at the Hotel Crillon, which was the most prestigious hotel in the city.
Just setting the stage perfectly.
These highly successful, cynical businessmen arrive, and Lustig introduces himself as the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. He sets the mood, acts incredibly serious, and drops a bombshell. He tells them the French government is quietly planning to dismantle the Eiffel Tower, and these 5 men have been selected to bid on the thousands of tons of scrap metal.
I mean, the sheer audacity required to sit in a room and pitch the sale of the most famous monument in the world is staggering.
It's insane.
But Lustig backs it up with meticulous execution. He hands out forged government dossiers filled with exact engineering specifications and tonnage figures. He loads them into a rented limousine, takes them to the tower, flashes a fake official badge to the guards, and gives them a VIP tour.
Just piling on the fake proof.
Exactly. He is overwhelming their senses with authority.
So he tells them to submit their bids. A few days later, he contacts one specific dealer, a man referred to in the historical texts as Monsieur P. Lustig, says, "Congratulations, your bid won." But to secure the contract, Monsieur P. must bring a certified check for 250,000 francs to the hotel suite. In modern money, we're talking about roughly $1 million.
And this is the exact moment the psychology of hesitation kicks in for the victim. Monsieur P. is initially ecstatic.
Naturally.
But as he arrives at the hotel with a massive fortune in his hands, his logical brain finally pierces through the emotional high. He starts calculating.
The reality check.
Right. Why are they meeting in a hotel suite instead of a government ministry? Why hasn't he met any other officials? He begins to hem and haw. The cognitive friction is building. He is on the verge of backing out.
Hold on, picture this scene for a second. Lustig is sitting across from a man holding $1 million check. Lustig can see the doubt. The mark is pulling away.
You can feel the tension.
Yeah. The natural, timid human response for Lustig in that moment, the self-preservation instinct, would be to try to placate the man, right? To reassure him, to maybe lower the price, or to desperately rush the paperwork to lock it in.
Which is exactly what would have sent Monsieur P running out the door.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. If Lustig had acted desperate or eager to please, the illusion of being a powerful, indifferent government bureaucrat would have instantly shattered. It would have confirmed the doubt.
Instead, Lustig leans entirely into the boldness. He suddenly shifts his demeanor. He stops talking about the tower altogether. He starts complaining.
This is the genius part.
He complains about his low government salary. He complains that his wife has expensive tastes. He complains about how unappreciated he is by the Republic.
He asks for a bribe.
He asks for a bribe. He is already in the middle of stealing $1 million, and he has the sheer guts to demand cash under the table on top of it. And the reaction from Monsieur P is what makes this so incredibly profound. He isn't outraged. He is relieved.
Immense relief. And it's because Lustig understood schema theory perfectly.
Schema theory.
Yeah, a schema is a cognitive framework that helps us organize and interpret information. In Monsieur P's lived experience as a businessman in the 1920s, his schema for a real French government bureaucrat inherently included corruption.
Ah, of course.
Every real official he had ever dealt with eventually asked for a kickback. By acting corrupt, Lustig perfectly matched Monsieur P's preconceived notion of reality. The bribe was the ultimate proof of authenticity. It resolved the cognitive dissonance completely.
That is wild.
So Monsieur P slips Lustig a thick envelope of cash, hands over the certified check for the tower, and leaves feeling like a savvy, connected insider.
It's mind-blowing. Lustig cashes the check, flees the country, and Monsieur P is eventually so profoundly humiliated by his own gullibility that he refuses to go to the police. Lustig gets away clean.
Unbelievable.
And months later, he comes back to Paris and runs the exact same scam on a different group of dealers, walking away with another massive payday. So let's dissect the architecture of this lie. Why does the human brain fall for something so massive when it would instantly scrutinize something small?
It's the phenomenon of the bigger the lie.
Yeah.
Our brains are cognitive misers. We want to conserve mental energy.
Make shortcuts?
Exactly.
Huh.
If Lustig tried to sell a small bridge over the Seine, a businessman could easily verify ownership, check local records, and assess the true value. The scale is manageable.
Right.
But the Eiffel Tower, the scale is so monumental that our brains employ a heuristic, a mental shortcut. We subconsciously assume that no human being would have the audacity to lie about something of that magnitude.
Yeah.
The largeness of the scale distracts the eye and awes the mind.
When you ask for the moon, people are so stunned by the sheer size of the request that they forget to question your fundamental right to ask for it in the first place. But what about the bribe? What is the practical takeaway there for someone negotiating today?
The bribe is a masterclass in the dynamics of leverage. By asking for more when he sensed doubt, Lustig put Monsieur P entirely on the defensive. He circumvented what negotiators call the nibbling effect.
Wait, stop right there. You're telling me that when the person across the table is clearly getting cold feet, lowering my price to save the deal is the worst thing I can do?
Absolutely.
Wow.
In the framework of power dynamics, backing down signals that your initial price was artificially inflated. It tells the other party that you are trying to take advantage of them, which destroys trust. When you lower your price in response to hesitation, you invite them to keep nibbling away at you. You've bled in the water.
That makes so much sense.
But when you double down, when you hold perfectly firm or even expand your demands while projecting absolute authority, you overwhelm their logical defenses. You project an unwavering belief in your own value. You force the other party to adapt to your reality rather than you shrinking to fit theirs.
So boldness literally functions as a reality distortion field. Okay, from financial negotiation and monumental con artistry, let's pivot to how this exact same mechanism works in the realm of social dynamics, attention, and romance. Because boldness isn't just about money, it's about the economy of attention.
Right, and in any social hierarchy, attention is the ultimate currency. What draws attention draws power.
Definitely.
The timid fade into the wallpaper, they become invisible. But the audacious draw the eye. They provide a spectacle, and humans are biologically hardwired to monitor anomalies in our environment. We cannot look away from the bold.
Look at the historical analysis of Giacomo Casanova. When most people hear the word seducer, they picture someone with, perfectly calculated pickup lines, manipulative charm, playing games.
Yeah, that's the stereotype.
But historical accounts suggest Casanova's success wasn't about having the perfect script at all. It was about his capacity for complete, unhesitating surrender to the moment.
And this touches on the psychology of being engulfed. Seduction, whether romantic, or the persuasion of a charismatic speaker, or being swept up in a political movement, is essentially an altered state of consciousness.
An altered state.
Yeah, it is the feeling of being temporarily taken outside of yourself. We all walk around carrying a heavy burden of daily anxieties, self-doubt, and internal monologue.
Oh, for sure. Constant chatter.
Right. So when someone approaches you with absolute, unhesitating boldness, their external focus infects you. It draws you completely out of your own head. You are relieved of the burden of your own self-consciousness.
In the moment that person hesitates, the magical charm shatters. Because suddenly you see the gears turning in their head, you realize they're calculating, you become aware of the process, which makes you hyper-aware of your own process, and instantly, everyone in the room is self-conscious again. It's like watching a live theater performance.
How do you mean?
Well, think about an actor performing a deeply eccentric, bizarre character on stage. If that actor is only 90% committed to the performance, if there is a tiny 10% sliver of self-doubt in their eye, the audience feels it instantly.
Oh, yeah. It breaks the illusion.
We get that awkward energy. We feel embarrassed for them. We cringe. But if that exact same actor is 100% committed, throwing their entire soul into this bizarre character without a single shred of hesitation, the audience is mesmerized. The lack of hesitation transforms the performance from cringe-inducing to brilliant.
That's a great analogy. The boldness directs the audience's attention outward, maintaining the illusion. The 17th century French author Ninon de l'Enclos wrote extensively on this.
What did she say?
She argued that women and people in general really prefer a little rough handling to too much consideration.
Interesting.
Her point was that when someone shows too much timidity or too much hesitant respect for another person's resistance, it actually forces the other person to maintain their defenses. It forces them to play the role of the virtuous resistor. But a bold approach relieves the target of the burden of making the decision. It allows them to simply yield to the momentum of the moment. She famously said, "A little more boldness on your part would put you both at your ease."
It is psychologically relaxing for everyone else in the room when someone takes total control with unwavering confidence. You don't have to worry about driving the car anymore. You can just look out the window. And this principle of audacious attention grabbing can be incredibly weaponized by those who have absolutely no power at all.
Which brings us to the story of Pietro Aretino, a perfect study in asymmetrical social warfare.
It's an amazing story. So it's the year 1514 in Rome. Pietro Aretino is a 22-year-old nobody. He is an assistant scullion, literally washing pots in the kitchens of a wealthy Roman family. But he has massive ambitions. He wants to be a great, recognized writer.
But the problem is structural. He's a lowly servant, he has no money, no pedigree, and no audience.
Exactly. How does a pot washer get the attention of the Renaissance world?
He utilizes the David and Goliath strategy. He finds the biggest possible target.
And what a target. That year, Pope Leo X had received a magnificent gift from the King of Portugal, a massive live white elephant named Hanno.
The Pope adored this elephant. It was paraded through the streets, showered with gifts, and treated almost like royalty.
But tragically, Hanno became deathly ill. The Pope's physicians desperately tried to save it, even administering a 500-pound purgative laced with gold, but the elephant died.
A bizarre historical detail.
Right. So the Pope is absolutely devastated. He goes into deep mourning. He commissions the legendary artist Raphael to paint a life-sized fresco of the elephant over its tomb. The whole city of Rome is wrapped in this very serious, solemn atmosphere of grief. And this is the exact moment our kitchen boy, Aretino, decides to strike.
He spots the opening.
Yes. He writes a satirical pamphlet titled The Last Will and Testament of the Elephant Hanno. He circulates it anonymously, and it causes an absolute uproar of hysterical laughter across Rome.
The pamphlet is vicious. It pretends to be the dying elephant bequeathing its body parts to the highest-ranking officials in the Catholic Church, specifically targeting their most famous unspoken flaws.
So clever.
To a cardinal known for groveling and sycophancy, the elephant leaves its knees so he can bow better.
Eh.
To a cardinal notorious for his greed and theft, the elephant leaves its massive jaws. And to a cardinal famous for his relentless lechery, the elephant leaves, well, the appropriate, oversized part of its own anatomy.
He spares no one. He mocks the Pope himself. The pamphlet ends with the verse essentially saying, make sure Aretino is your friend because his tongue could ruin the High Pope himself. This is 1514. Men had been burned at the stake, tortured, and excommunicated for whispering far less offensive things about the papacy. It was an incredibly dangerous move.
But psychologically, the strategy was flawless. When you were small and obscure, you must attack the giant. If Aretino had mocked another kitchen servant, no one would have cared. If he had mocked a local merchant, he might have just been quietly beaten to death in an alley. But by attacking the absolute pinnacle of European power, the audacity of the attack made him an instant sensation. The human brain is wired to pay attention to massive asymmetries. Everyone in Rome was desperate to discover the identity of this spectacularly daring young man.
And the most shocking part of the story, the Pope himself is so amused and so impressed by the sheer, unadulterated guts it took to write the pamphlet that instead of having Aretino executed, he seeks him out and gives him a highly paid, prestigious job in the papal service.
It's incredible.
Aretino leverages this initial burst of audacity to become known as the Scourge of Princes, earning the fear and respect of monarchs across all of Europe.
Aretino tapped into a deeply rooted sociological truth there. Society is full of people who harbor rebellious, daring thoughts, but lack the courage to publicize them. They fear the social repercussions.
Sure, we all do.
When you voice what the public secretly feels but is too timid to say, you tap into an explosive reservoir of shared emotion. The public will always delight in the spectacle of the underdog throwing a rock at Goliath, and they will honor the boldness of the act.
So Aretino used boldness for fame and a job. It was essentially a high-stakes PR stunt. But what happens when the stakes aren't just social climbing, but actual, literal survival? What happens when boldness is the only mechanism to survive true predators?
That takes us to a much darker place.
Yeah, let's shift our focus to 16th century Russia and the chilling story of a young boy who would grow up to become Ivan the Terrible.
This is perhaps the darkest historical analysis we have, but it perfectly illustrates the critical importance of timing and the obliteration of space between action and execution.
So the year is 1533. Vasily III, the Grand Duke of Moscow, dies. His heir is his son, Ivan IV, who is only 3 years old. Ivan's mother, Helena, is appointed regent. This political instability immediately sparks joy among the boyars, the Russian aristocracy.
Right, the boyars had been slowly losing their power to the royal family for generations.
Exactly. Now they see a dead duke, a foreign woman in charge, and a toddler on the throne. They smell blood in the water.
And they move with ruthless efficiency. 5 years into the regency, Ivan's mother suddenly dies, almost certainly poisoned by the Shusky family, which was the most powerful and fearsome of the boyar clans. They violently seize control of the government.
Just a total coup.
Yeah, they throw Ivan's closest protector and confidant into a dungeon where he is starved to death. Suddenly, at the age of 8, young Ivan is a despised, isolated orphan trapped in his own palace, surrounded by the men who murdered his family.
The psychological torture Ivan endured is staggering. He roamed the palace hungry, dressed in threadbare clothes, constantly hiding from the Shuskis who would physically abuse him. As a cruel psychological joke, they would sometimes hunt him down, force him into heavy royal robes, sit him on the throne, mock his royal pretensions, and then shove him to the ground.
It's horrific.
He watched his few remaining friends beaten. He watched the Metropolitan, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, flee to Ivan's bedroom for sanctuary, only for the boyars to burst in, hurl insults, and beat the holy man mercilessly while the young boy watched in silent horror.
We have to deeply analyze Ivan's response to this trauma, because it reveals the architecture of survival against overwhelming force. Throughout years of daily torture, humiliation, and starvation, Ivan maintained a strict, absolute silence. He did not whine. He did not cry to the palace guards. He did not try to negotiate with the boyars for better food or slightly better treatment.
Wait, why? Wouldn't the natural instinct be to beg or to try and strike a deal just to make the pain stop?
Because Ivan intuitively understood the psychology of appeasement. Appeasement validates the aggressor's premise. The source material notes, going halfway with half a heart, digs the deeper grave.
That's a powerful quote.
If Ivan had shown even a spark of rebellion or tried to logically argue his position or negotiated for a larger scrap of food, the boyars would have immediately registered him as a developing threat. They would have simply slipped poison into his next meal, just like they did to his mother. Negotiating with a predator does not pacify them. It merely shows them where your soft underbelly is.
You know, the metaphor of the boyars extends far beyond 16th century Russia. We encounter boyars in modern life all the time. People who jealously guard their little fiefdoms of power, who despise your ambition, and who will actively work to thwart you the moment they sense you growing in strength.
Exactly. Office politics, social circles, it happens everywhere.
If you try to compromise with people who fundamentally want to see you fail, you are just giving them the leverage they need to destroy you.
Spot on. So Ivan lies low. For 5 long years, he plays the role of the terrified, obedient, broken idiot. The boyars gradually begin to ignore him. They let their guard down, convinced he is thoroughly neutralized.
They write him off.
Then, on the evening of December 29th, 1543, Ivan, now 13 years old, makes his move. He calmly asks Prince Andrei Shuisky, the leader of his tormentors, to come to his bedroom.
And when Prince Andrei arrogantly walks in, likely expecting to just toss the boy around and mock him again, he finds the room filled with heavily armed palace guards.
Ivan, the boy who had been silent for 5 years, doesn't scream, doesn't monologue, and doesn't explain himself. He simply points his finger at Andrei and orders the guards to arrest him, execute him, and throw his body to the bloodhounds in the royal kennel.
Wait, hold on, I'm struggling with this. You're saying the rule is interaction with boldness, but Ivan sat in absolute silence for 5 years. 5 years of doing nothing. Isn't waiting just a glorified, drawn-out form of hesitation?
Oh, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of what hesitation is. Waiting is not hesitation if it is a strategic calculation.
Okay, clarify that for me.
Hesitation is an emotional state of doubt that occurs during the execution of an action. Ivan wasn't hesitating. He was meticulously gathering resources. He was spending those years quietly building alliances with the palace guards, ensuring their loyalty when the moment came. As we established with the highway analogy, boldness is not impulsivity. You can spend 5 years planning an assassination, or 5 months planning a hostile corporate takeover, or 5 weeks preparing a proposal for a massive raise. The planning phase must be slow, calculating, and hidden. But once the decision is made to act, the execution, the exact moment of pointing the finger or stating your demand, must be instantaneous, total, and without a single flicker of doubt.
It's the concept of the snake strike. The sheer velocity of the move leaves the enemy absolutely no space to organize a defense or even process what is happening. Over the next few days, Ivan had all of Andrei's close associates arrested and banished. The boyars were caught completely off guard by the sudden, brutal audacity of it.
They were terrified.
They were thrown into mortal terror of this 13-year-old boy. That one single, swift act secured his absolute power for decades. By intimidating with a bold move, you establish a precedent of terror. You obliterate the gaps where resistance could form.
But you don't always need an army of palace guards to establish that kind of unquestionable authority. Sometimes pure, unadulterated self-belief is enough to alter the fabric of how the world values you.
Which transitions us into the concept of the big ask and how audacity functions as a self-fulfilling prophecy of valuation.
This is huge.
This might be the most practical application for anyone listening right now. We are talking about the mechanics of setting your own price. We constantly put ourselves down by asking for too little. We artificially deflate our own value because we are paralyzed by the fear of hearing the word no, or we feel we haven't earned the right to ask for more.
To illustrate the sheer power of self-valuation, we have this wonderful Korean fable about a poor, obscure scholar named Huslang. He's a man who has spent 7 years locked in his freezing room reading philosophy while his wife washes clothes for the neighbors just to keep them from starving to death.
Just absolute poverty.
Finally, his wife reaches her breaking point. She is starving, she is exhausted, and she demands he go out and do something to bring in money.
So, Hussein, wearing literal rags with no shoes, walks out the door, goes to the center of the bustling town, and asks a random merchant, "Who is the richest man in this town?" They point him to a millionaire named Bidensi. Hussein walks straight through the massive gates of this opulent mansion, flings open the guest room door, looks the millionaire dead in the eye, and demands a loan of 10,000 yang, a staggering fortune to start a business.
He shows absolutely no shame.
None. No sense of inferiority. He offers zero collateral, and he doesn't even explain what the business is.
And the millionaire, Bidensi, simply looks at him and says, "All right, sir, where shall I send the money?" He grants the massive loan instantly.
It sounds absurd.
But wait, when the millionaire's guests ask him why on earth he just handed a fortune to a ragged beggar, Bidensi explains the underlying psychology. He says that common people who come to borrow money are always full of shame. They make endless excuses, they try to flatter him, they nervously justify their requests, and they radiate inferiority. But this man, despite his rags, spoke clearly, directly to the point, with dauntless eyes and a booming, unwavering voice.
The millionaire concluded that a man with that much unshakable self-confidence must possess a superhuman intellect. He says, "Money often makes a man small, but a man like him makes big money."
This perfectly illustrates how human society operates on heuristics. We do not have the time, the energy, or the data to deeply investigate the true intrinsic value of every single person we interact with. So we use mental shortcuts. We use confidence as a proxy for competence.
That is so true in modern business.
We judge a person's worth heavily by the value they clearly and undeniably place on themselves. If you demand respect, if you state your high price without flinching, apologizing, or endlessly justifying it, people subconsciously assume you must be worth it. Their brain logic says, why else would they be so incredibly confident?
We see this exact dynamic historically with Christopher Columbus. When he proposed his voyage to the Americas to the Spanish court, he didn't just ask for a few ships and some funding. He made the insanely bold demand that he be officially titled the Grand Admiral of the Ocean.
It was a completely absurd request for an unproven, obscure explorer.
But the court agreed. By demanding to be treated with ultimate transcendent respect, he anchored his value so astronomically high that they simply accepted his premise.
Henry Kissinger famously utilized this as a core negotiation tactic. He found that bold, massive demands almost always yield better results than piecemeal, logical concessions. If you start a negotiation by trying to meet halfway, or by offering a fair, logical compromise out of the gate, you instantly anchor your value at the bottom. You establish that your baseline is negotiable.
There is another fable here from the source material, the fable of the knight errant, which beautifully captures how logic actually paralyzes us in these moments. Two adventurers are walking through a forest and find a signpost pointing to an impossible task. The sign reads that to find ultimate greatness, a knight must cross a raging, violent torrent of water, pick up a massive stone elephant on the other side, and carry it in one single breath to the top of a sheer mountain.
One of the adventurers, the logical, analytical one, immediately starts doing the math. He begins philosophizing. He uses what the fable calls nice calculations.
Wise calculation.
Right. He looks at the water and says, the current is too fast. The elephant is obviously too heavy. Biologically, a mortal man could only carry it 4 steps, let alone to the top of a mountain in one breath without oxygen. The physics don't make sense. This is a ridiculous suicide mission. And he walks away.
But the bold adventurer doesn't calculate. He doesn't do the math. He just closes his eyes, rushes blindly across the violent river, and when he gets to the other side, he discovers the massive stone elephant is actually just a tiny carved dwarf figure of an elephant.
It was an illusion.
Yeah, he scoops it up, carries it up the hill in one breath, discovers a hidden utopian city, and the awestruck people immediately crown him as their new king.
The moral is that great enterprises are only achieved by adventurous spirits. The people who calculate every single difficulty, who map out every possible point of failure, lose all their momentum and hesitation. Logic and nice calculations often breed timidity because logic is incredibly efficient at pointing out risk. If you over-intellectualize a bold move, your brain will always find a mathematically sound reason not to do it.
So if you are letting timidity control your career or your life, you have to realize that your fears of the consequences of a bold action are almost always massively out of proportion to reality. The consequences of timidity are actually far worse. Your value is permanently lowered in the eyes of others, and you lock yourself into a self-fulfilling cycle of doubt. The problems created by an audacious move can usually be disguised or entirely remedied by simply applying more audacity.
However, and this is a monumental however,
There's always a catch.
there is a massive warning label attached to this entire philosophy. We need to discuss the danger of chronic audacity.
Right. Before you go out and start acting like a bulldozer in every aspect of your daily life, demanding to be called Grand Admiral of your office, we have to look at the fatal flaw of becoming addicted to your own boldness. Boldness should never be the fundamental strategy behind all of your actions. It is a tactical instrument. It is a specific tool you keep in your belt to be pulled out and deployed at the precise, correct moment.
Because going through life armed only with audacity is neurologically and socially exhausting. If you are constantly bold, constantly aggressive, constantly demanding the moon in every minor interaction, you will inevitably offend too many people. You will create enemies unnecessarily. You will generate an incredible amount of social friction.
Look at Lola Montez. She was a famous 19th century dancer and courtesan who used unbelievable audacity to seduce the King of Bavaria. She essentially made herself the shadow ruler of the entire country through sheer force of will and unapologetic boldness. But the problem was, she couldn't turn it off.
She completely lacked situational awareness. Once she attained power, she remained relentlessly audacious. She insulted high-ranking government ministers, caused massive public scandals, and refused to ever back down or compromise, even on the most trivial, meaningless matters.
Just totally inflexible.
Her boldness crossed the border into the appearance of cruelty and borderline insanity. It led directly to her catastrophic downfall, not just in Bavaria, but everywhere she traveled thereafter. She alienated everyone because she couldn't dial it back.
We see the exact same tragic arc with Ivan the Terrible. The bold, sudden strike that saved his life at age 13 was a stroke of absolute tactical genius. But because it worked so incredibly well, it triggered a dopamine response. It became his only tool for dealing with the world.
A deadly addiction.
It metastasized into a lifelong pattern of extreme paranoia, terrifying violence, and unchecked sadism. He lost the ability to differentiate between a situation that required a bold strike and a situation that required subtle diplomacy. He ultimately ended up murdering his own beloved son in a blind fit of audacious rage.
This highlights the core neurobiology of boldness. It triggers adrenaline and dopamine, which makes it chemically addictive, but it is fundamentally an acquired habit, a learned response.
So it can be controlled.
Exactly. Even Napoleon Bonaparte, perhaps the most audacious military commander in human history, had to consciously cultivate the habit of boldness on the battlefield. In normal, civilian social settings, historical accounts show Napoleon was actually quite awkward, hesitant, and timid.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He learned to switch the boldness on precisely when the tactical situation demanded it. Because it is a learned response, it must be consciously controlled and utilized at will.
But how do you calibrate that? If boldness is a learned response and timidity is a learned response to avoid conflict, how do you actively feign timidity, which the source material suggests is actually a great offensive weapon, without accidentally internalizing it and becoming the scared hare all over again?
It requires a profound dissociation between your internal emotional state and your external projection. Feigned timidity is a brilliant tactical maneuver. You act shy, you act hesitant, you lower the defenses of your target, luring them into a false sense of superiority so you can pounce with a bold strike when they are vulnerable.
Classic misdirection.
But to execute that successfully, your internal core must remain absolutely confident and emotionally detached. You are playing a role, like the theater actor we discussed earlier. The moment you start believing your own feigned timidity, the moment you actually feel the fear, you've lost. Calibration requires relentless self-awareness. You have to constantly ask yourself, am I being quiet right now because it's the smart tactical move, or am I being quiet because I'm genuinely afraid of the tension? If it's the latter, you need to grasp the nettle tightly.
Grasp the nettle tightly so it does no hurt. We have covered incredible ground today. We started with the reality warping scale of Victor Lustig, proving that a lie told with enough audacious scale can bypass human logic and exploit our cognitive heuristics.
We examine the seductive, outer-directed illusion of Casanova and how Aretino weaponized the David and Goliath dynamic to capture the attention of Renaissance Rome.
We analyze the chilling patience and the sudden gap-obliterating strike of Ivan the Terrible, proving that negotiating with predators and going halfway with half a heart only digs a deeper grave.
And we explored the self-fulfilling valuation of Hussang and Christopher Columbus, demonstrating that human brains use confidence as a proxy for competence, and society will generally accept the price you boldly set for yourself.
The overarching mechanism here is clear. Hesitation is a self-fulfilling cycle of doubt that physiologically and psychologically creates the very obstacles you fear. Boldness, while it must be strictly managed as a tactical tool and not a chronic personality trait, has the almost magical ability to hide your deficiencies, compel respect, and force the world to adapt to your reality.
I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to mull over, drawn from the writings of Niccolo Machiavelli. He observed that fortune is a woman, and that she lets herself be overcome by the bold rather than by those who proceed coldly. He argued that fortune fundamentally favors the young, the fierce, and the audacious.
It's a classic, ruthless Machiavellian observation.
It is, but apply that concept of proceeding coldly to our current era. Look at modern society. We live in a culture that is absolutely obsessed with data, with analytics, with total risk mitigation, in corporate business models, in political polling, even in our personal lives with algorithmic dating apps. We try to mathematically optimize every single decision we make.
We're terrified of making the wrong move.
Right. We act exactly like the knight's companion in the fable, making endless nice calculations to prove exactly why the stone elephant cannot be lifted. We proceed incredibly coldly. But if human nature hasn't fundamentally changed, if fortune still truly favors the fierce and the audacious, is it possible that our modern obsession with perfectly calculated, risk-free decision-making is actually making us statistically less likely to achieve anything of extraordinary greatness? Have we essentially systematized timidity?
Have we systematized timidity? Are your spreadsheets, your endless data analyses, and your pros and cons lists actually just highly sophisticated, socially acceptable disguises for your own hesitation? That is a profound question to walk away with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of power. As you step out into your world this week, keep your eyes open. Find your stone elephant, stop calculating the steps, and leap across the gap. See you next time.